I think JetBlue is possibly in a difficult spot. If you look at it today versus the pandemic, its leverage is very high. It hasn't generated cash in a while. It
like
hasn't.
6 years.
Yes, correct.
That's a while.
So what are these? Is there a market for these lower cost regional airlines today? Is there even a business proposition, particularly with jet fuel at these levels?
You know, it's really hard for the discount airlines. I mean, I think we've seen structural adjustments post-pandemic. Part of that's coming from the consumer. You now have a lot of consumers that are no longer in the office 5 days a week. That has affected travel patterns. You also now have a lot of the traveling public is from the wealthier side of the fence. So if you're one of the big three, you're enjoying the flow, you're enjoying premium, you're enjoying your co-branded card remuneration. But for the discount folks, it's a tough one. And pre-pandemic, they would really win the battle by diluting seat mile cost. And we've seen so much cost convergence. We don't have the air traffic control capability to jam a whole bunch of flights like we used to. So those guys are in a tough spot.
So what is you mentioned the air traffic control. What is the solution there? Is it just hiring more bodies? Is it improving the technology? Is it all of the above? Because I don't know where that problem came from, but
Yeah, you know what? That's been brewing a while. So there have actually been attempts over the years to try and modernize the air traffic control system. There was talk about using satellites. It seems to be very slow for that stuff to get impacted and affected. And I think part of that's coming from, appropriations in Congress and what have you. But the job itself and training air traffic controllers, I mean, that's not a particularly easy task.
I mean, I was just, again, coming into work today up the Jersey Turnpike. Literally a plane flew right over my car like it does every single morning. How does a plane hit a lamp pole in Newark, by the way? I don't know what happened there.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that I don't think I've seen that before myself.
That just shows you, the air traffic control and the whole thing just needs an upgrade.
In your world, Steve and Trent, is there a more persistent stream of cash flows with all the buffeting and, the price of fuel and all that? Is it a more blue chip sector than in your ute?
I would say today versus 20 years ago, the network airlines are definitely stronger cash flow producers. Not only because 20 years ago, you had a lot more network airlines, and they've all merged, for example. But you also have co-branded card remuneration is huge. So some of this flow is coming through the income statement, the royalties they receive from the credit cards. But a lot of that flow is working capital tailwind. So every time somebody uses the card, so when you look at the cash flow coming in from that and the amount they're doing at a premium.
Okay, so Delta, whichever, what portion of their story is the credit cards versus actually running an airline?
Yeah, look, you've heard the saying that you now have credit card companies that start airlines. I would say it's the opposite. When we think about the stability in the earnings stream and the cash flow stream, I would absolutely say the co-branded card remuneration is a very important part of it. Maybe 1/3 of that greater stability.
33% as a credit card company.
The greater stability, yes, at least that.
How do you spend your miles?
On flights.
Flights, I do too.
Absolutely.
They want me to spend it on everything else, and Afterthought needed a ticket. I'm shocked.
Yep.
I know you're shocked.
Yeah, exactly.
And I did it with miles. It actually worked.
And it works. I get value out of that. So in the airline business today, for an investor, how do you play it with, given where jet fuel is, it's got to be a crusher on profit margins. But when you talk to institutional investors, how are they playing in the airline business these days?
Yeah, look, I think over the short term, you'll have a little bit of noise in JetBlue and Frontier because of Spirit's demise. But I think when we look at jet fuel, I think people are looking back to what happened in 2022, where we did have this big spike in fuel, where fuel prices didn't really start to subside until July. And what you saw over that period is the network airlines were really able to sustain a long period of higher yields. And the pricing if you look at sort of the sequential increase in yields versus sequential increase in jet fuel kerosene, you saw 1 year of stronger pricing from the network.
So they do
airlines.
pass along to consumers the price increases?
Absolutely, there is an effort to raise fares, and if they need to, very likely we'll see more capacity cuts that should also support pricing.
To Paul's good question about, I call it the aircraft carrier known as Newark Airport. How are we doing on Not in My Backyard building new airports nationwide?
Well, look, I think that in terms of the effort to build out some of these new facilities, I think that's actually a really good effort on their part. So a carrier like United has done very well in terms of cash flow from operations growth, for example. Yeah. And one thing you look that I think is changing now versus pre-pandemic, I would say with the discount airlines pre-pandemic, there was the saying, what's good for the consumer is bad for the shareholder or vice versa. So you look at a Spirit, people didn't want to fly them, but Spirit pre-pandemic made a lot of money. I think United Airlines and others, I think, more focused on the customer experience now. They want sticky, relatively wealthy flow, and the airport upgrades are part of that.
Yep. Do you have a single best buy?
Copa Airlines in Panama is my favorite.
You're still flagging that one.
That one is unbelievable. 21% EBIT margin, 6% cash dividend yield. They have a moat serving a preponderance of low-density routes out of their Tocumen hub. That one I feel is in a class by itself. But we're fans of the big three. Maybe the place where we're out of consensus is going to be American Airlines with a positive view.